Hello, welcome to my shop. This is the third video of the suspension and chassis series. If you haven't caught the first and second, I highly suggest you go back first and catch them as we tie all these in together. In this video, we're going to be focusing on the high-speed compression on the rear shock, the low-speed compression, the rebound, and on the forks, we're going to be focusing on the rebound, the low-speed compression, and the oil fork height on the inside of the forks. Just a quick rundown. The high speed compression on the rear shock is this 17mm hex right here, this blue one. The low speed is the flathead on the inside, and that's your compression. High speed, the big one here, and low speed, the flathead. The rebound on the shock is down underneath the swing arm here at the bottom of the shock. Let me get to it. Yeah, there it is. You see that flathead right in there? That's your rebound setting. And then on the forks, you have your compression up here in the top. It even says comp right there, the flathead right there in the very middle. Not the one right here. This is to bleed the forks. It's the one in the very middle does your compression. And then the rebound is on the bottom, the flathead that up in there. And of course, you have one on each fork. You have a rebound on this one and on this one, and you have compression in here and here. In most circumstances, you want to keep these at the even amount. Although you can you can get a little uneven if you have to. Like you could run 10 clicks on this one and 11 on that one. If 10 on both was too stiff and 11 on both was too soft, you can run a 10 and 11 to get the middle ground. But otherwise, you want to make sure that they're even. Both the rebound on the bottom, both of them, and the compression on the top. So the rebound on the bottom of the shock and the rebound on the bottom of the forks. One thing I do want to mention is you'll notice on some bikes they have 10 written down here on the bottom of the forks where the rebound's at. This one doesn't, but some bikes like Hondas will have 10, T-E-N. What that stands for is tension. And in some parts of the world they don't call it a rebound setting, they call it a tension setting. The reason being is because the rebound not only controls how fast let's say the rear wheel is fully compressed and you let it go and it comes back down. That's your rebound, how fast your suspension rebounds back up to its full height. But on the rebound clickers in this bike, it not only affects the rebound, how fast it comes up, it also affects the low speed compression. So that's why they call it a tension, because it actually does both. As you turn in your rebound clicker, it will also give you more low speed compression, as it also adds more rebound compression, or rebound dampening, I'm sorry. And another thing I want to mention too is when I mention something like 10 clicks or 11 clicks on the clickers on your the flatheads, these are what you call clickers. You have them up here, 2 down there, 2 up here, 1 on the top of your shock, the flathead, and 1 on the bottom, the rebound. People call them clickers, and the reason being is because when you turn it, every quarter turn on this bike, you'll feel a click, click, click. How you get your setting or your number, let's say like this bike, let's say I'm running 10 on the compression. What you do is you turn it all the way in. You'll feel it clicking as you're turning it in. You turn it all the way in, and you lightly seat it. Once you bottom it out by turning it in, don't turn it anymore. Turn it in clockwise. Don't turn it any harder once you hit the bottom, because you can actually damage the needle in the seat, and that also goes for the shock as well. On these clickers, you just want to lightly seat them, and then you count the clicks as you turn it out, and that's where you get the number. Like if I say 10 clicks, then what I mean is turning this all the way in until it bottoms out lightly, and then turning it out, counting every time it clicks, which it clicks 4 times for each rotation, and until you get 10 clicks, and you leave it right there. And that would be a rebound setting or a compression setting of 10 clicks. Just remember, you don't want to bottom them out too hard, because it's basically a needle going into a orifice, and if you press that needle too hard into it, it doesn't want to come back out, and when you go to screw it back out, it gets stuck in there. So that's why when you bottom it out, you always want to bottom them out gently. So let's talk about the rebound only right now, both front and rear. We'll start with the rear. If you have too much rebound in the rear, meaning you turn it in too far, the clicker's in too far clockwise, the back end can, when it compresses, it takes too long to get back up, and it can pack, as they call it. It also makes the bike jump very funny, especially if it's on balance between the front and rear. If you have more rebound dampening in the front by turning the clicker in to increase the rebound dampening, if you have more in the front than in the back, then when you hit a jump, once you get in the air, when both wheels go to extend, once you get in the air, if the front extends quicker than the back, it'll cause the front end to come up and jump front and high, and the back end will stay sunk down in the air, and it causes the front end high. And the opposite is true up front too. If you don't have enough rebound dampening in the front, let's say you turn your rebound clickers all the way out, it can cause the front end to jump too high. Or if you turn them all the way in, it can cause the front end to jump low, because it compresses going up the face, and then once you get in the air, it comes up so slow that you don't get that reaction. So you want both of them to, you want the whole bike to extend back up evenly. Anytime it's compressed, you want it to come up evenly. So balance is real important. When you have your rebound set correctly front and rear, it almost feels like the bike has suction cups on the track. Like, it's hard for the wheels to get kicked off the ground. It feels like it's just really sticking to the ground and tracking the ground well. And that's a good feeling. That's what you're looking for. But too much rebound can cause it where the bike packs, as they call it, and it'll jump funny with very little control. Because when you jump, you do want to feel the wheels come back up, or the compression to extend, because that gives you a little bit of energy to work with in the air to allow you to use that energy to correct anything in the air that might have went wrong off the face. So you can use that energy. When you see people whip, a lot of times, so you'll see the bike compress, and when they come up, they use that energy as they're leaning the bike. The wheels extend out, and they use that energy to control the whip. It's energy. And so if you turn your rebound clickers too far in, you start robbing some of that energy that you need to be able to control the bike in the air. And then if you turn your rebound clickers too far out and you don't have enough rebound dampening, the bike will just feel like it never settles. It's just busy. The bike, that's a good way to describe it. The bike will feel busy. It's always going up and down, and just it's hitting stuff and deflecting it too hard, so you're getting front end kicks and rear end kicks. So what you want to do is you want to turn the rebound on both the shock and the fork. Let's just talk about the shock here. You want to, what I do is I keep turning in a click and a click, and I go, I'll do one click at a time, do a couple laps, come back in, do another click. Or my favorite thing to do is actually find like one of the light beams on the track or whatever, take a flathead and just stick it right in there, and I can come back around and make adjustments and just stay on the track. I don't have to get off. And of course, as you start adding rebound to the rear, you'll notice as you start adding it, if it feels good as you're adding it, but you might have to add some to the front to keep it in balance as you're adding rebound dampening by turning the clickers inward. And then the opposite is true. It's really hard to explain unless you just get out there and try it for yourself and get a feel for it, because the rebound, out of all the clickers, in my opinion, is probably the most important of the clickers. And a lot of the old school guys focus mainly on compression, low speed compression on the forks and on the shock, and they don't even consider the rebound very much, unless they're getting kicks, and then they go and they crank in the rebound real far to try to help slow down the kicking. But sometimes the kick can just be caused by your rear end sag being too low, and you hit the bumper at unexpected times. So that's not always the answer. If you're kicking, don't just rush to the rebound. You have to figure out why you're kicking. So I like to set my rear rebound where, like, when I come out of turns, if I have a good setting, when I come out of a turn, I'm hard on the throttle coming out of a turn, and then I start straightening the bike up. If I start hitting like accelerating G-outs on the track and bumps on the track, it doesn't throw my weight forward when I hit them. It soaks them, like the rear end will soak up, like the rear end will soak it up. The suspension will soak up the bump as I'm accelerating forward, and then it just kind of follows the ground as it comes out of it. It doesn't transmit the energy so much to me and the bike and pitch me forward, which can cause the back wheels to come light and cause you to lose traction. So So you want to turn it in until you get that type of feel. But if you go too far, you'll know, because it starts feeling funny. If you turn it in too far and you add too much rebound dampening on the rear, you'll notice that then in the air it feels flat. The rear end feels flat, as far as like it doesn't have that coming off the lip. It doesn't have that energy that I was mentioning, where you can kind of gives you some energy to play with in the air to be able to control the bike. It just starts feeling dead. I guess that's the right way to describe it. So you want to turn it in as far as you can get away with without it becoming dead feeling. Now, as you remember, I mentioned that as you turn the rebound, the rebound clickers in and you increase your rebound dampening, it also adds low speed compression. So sometimes to get the rebound that you want, how fast it extends out in the rear, to get that how you want it, sometimes if you're turning it in and it back end, you'll notice the back end also starts feeling stiffer because it's adding low speed compression. So you might have to come up here and take a click or two out, turn it outward to remove some compression dampening as you're adding rebound. That does happen. So just keep in mind that you are adding low speed compression, the flathead right here, as you add rebound dampening by turning the clickers in. You will also be adding low speed compression in at the same time. It is tension, and it does go both ways. And then for the front forks on the rebound, it's the same thing. You pay attention to how it tracks the ground. When you go in a corner and you're on the brakes and you're slowing down from a corner, when you start getting on the gas, if the front end pops up like this and jumps you out of line as you start getting on the gas, sometimes turning the rebound clickers and adding more rebound dampening will help keep that from happening and help it stay glued instead of popping out of the line and jumping out of line. It'll make the front end stay sunk down, so to say, as you start rolling in the power to help you stay in the line. But if you add too much rebound dampening by turning the clickers in, then the front end it'll start feeling funny on the face of the jump. It'll jump almost like the front end doesn't really want to come up. Once it leaves the lip, it'll feel sunk down and almost make it jump front end low. And the bike can also become unstable. Like, let's say you land a jump that has a lot of little braking bumps down on the landing. You'll land, your back end will come up a little quicker than the front, and the front's still kind of down there, and that will steepen the head angle here, which does allow a bike to corner quicker, but it also can make the bike a little bit more or a little bit less stable. So if you have too much rebound dampening in the front, it can also make the bike a little bit less stable when you aren't coming up from big hits, because the front won't come up as quick as the back, and it will cause shaking and stuff like that. So, but just like the rear end, I do like to run as much rebound dampening as I can get away with. And I'm not saying going over the top. There's a fine line. So not going over the top. But if my range that I can ride this bike is, let's say, anywhere from 8 to 9 clicks on the front, seems to work. I can run at 9, it's good. A little bit on the looser side, or I can run it at 8, it's a little on the tighter side. I'm just going to go ahead and run at 8. And same goes with the shock, because I do like a good bike as far as I do like a lot of tension in the suspension. It keeps things very controlled. And if you watch the pros bikes when they ride, you don't see their bikes going up and down like this. Like, let's say they land, there's a flat spot and then it drops off 5 feet and land. You don't see them, if they're going fast and they just go off that drop off and land, you don't see their bike go ring, ring, like that. It just lands, poof, it comes up one time and that's it. And their bikes usually have really good rebound characteristics at the pro level, and you can get that too from these bikes, but you just have to play with the clickers and stuff. A lot of times, especially on these 2-strokes, the rebound clickers come stock with not enough rebound in them. They almost just feel very wallowy, like just bouncing around and wallowy and stuff. So you gotta tune in some tension to get that bike to behave. So don't be scared to turn in the rebound dampener until you find the setting you like. And if you keep turning in and you don't find it, then go back and start going out. Make it looser and see if what you're looking for is in that area. I can tell you on this bike right here, I'm running on the rear, I'm running 5 clicks from all the way in. 5 clicks rebound dampening. That sounds like a lot, but this bike really needs it. They've the way this bike is valved, the YZ250 two-stroke, they kind of gave a little bit too big of an orifice or a little bit too small of a needle for the rebound. So to get the action that I'm looking for, I have to run it at about 5 clicks from all the way in on the shock. And I think it was actually worse back in 2006 when the SSS first came out on the YZ250. Back then I was running 4 rebound clicks on the rear shock to get the feeling that I was looking for. Again, don't let the numbers get in your head. It's about what you feel on the track. So just go on the track, ride it, and don't even pay attention to the numbers until you get back home, and then maybe you can turn it in and count and see what you ended up with. That's what I did. And on the 06, I found 4 clicks did it. It's just the bike was way too bouncy in stock trim. On this bike, it's a 2018, I'm finding 5 clicks does it. I've tried 4, and on this bike, thinking that shock might be just like the 06, and it definitely, the back end would come down and not come back up quick enough. It kind of felt a little flat and dead going off the faces of jumps, and so I went to 5, and that seemed to put it right there. And then on the forks, I'm currently running, let me double check again. Yeah, on the forks, I'm running 9 on one fork, 9 clicks on one fork on the Rebound, and 10 on the other fork. And the reason being is because like I was saying, middle ground, 9 was a little bit too much Rebound, 10 wasn't quite enough, so I did a 9 and a 10, and that put me right where I needed to be. And this is not bad for this bike, because in 06 when this bike came out, believe it or not, I had to run 4 clicks Rebound on the forks to get the rebound I was looking for. But these forks did get updated in I think 2011, and they received different valving, and that's good. It seems like they definitely updated them. Honestly, it's probably just the 250F forks, or the valving, because they really weren't racing them or developing them. That's what I believe they are. But whatever the case is, they received some updated forks. However, I think the rear shock is pretty much the same thing for the most part since 06. And so that's why we're still having to crank the Rebound real far in on the shock. But the forks, I'm running a 9 and a 10, and that seems to be working for me. And the same goes true for the forks. As you turn the Rebound clickers in to get more rebound dampening, it's also going to add more compression, low speed compression dampening. So if you're going from, like, let's say 12 clicks, and then you go to 10, and you like the Rebound characteristics, but now it's starting to feel stiff, you can always just take a click out on the forks here, 1 on each fork, take a click out, and to lower some of that low speed, so you still retain the rebound dampening you're looking for, but now you lessen the compression dampening for what you're looking for. So just keep in mind that anytime you add rebound dampening by turning that Rebound clicker in, you will be increasing low speed compression dampening at the same time. It's just how it is. It's tension. So now let's talk about the low speed compression on the shock and the forks. We'll start with the shock here. Some people like to use the low speed, the flathead right here, the low speed compression on the shock and the forks, for that matter, to try to control bottoming. But that's the wrong approach. Low speed compression is more about helping to keep the bike from moving around a lot and using its stroke unnecessarily, and also the amount of feel that the bike is sending to the rider, how much feedback the rider is feeling. If you need to control bottoming from the rear, you have the high speed compression. That does a much better job at doing that than the low speed does. And but we'll get to that. And for the forks, it would be the fork oil height. But we're going to get to that here shortly. For right now, let's just focus on the low speed compression. You can try it for yourself. If you turn the low speed compression all the way out on the shock and the forks and ride the bike, it will feel very like you won't receive any information. It almost feel floaty. The bike will feel very floaty. You won't be able to tell when your wheels hit the ground. Like, let's say you have a jump that's going right into a corner, and the minute your wheels touch the ground, you got to get on the brakes hard to be able to slow down for that corner. You want to know exactly the moment that wheel touches the ground. If you don't have enough compression dampening, if you turn the clickers out too far on that, you're not going to know. You're not going to feel it when it first touches the ground. You're not going to get that information. So it is important to have a proper amount of low speed compression for feel on the bike. Another thing the low speed compression does is it controls unnecessary compressing of the suspension. Like, let's say, again, the same thing, you have a flat level ground and then a drop off, a 5 feet drop off, and then it's flat again, and the rider's going real fast. When they come down, if they don't have enough low speed compression, when they land, the bike will just dive too low and then come up instead, and that's just a lot. Especially like, let's say you had the flat ground, a drop off, and then a flat ground, and then a corner right here, right? If you want to go fast, handle that drop off, and you want your bike to do all its compressing and rebounding before that corner, so that your bike is already back into its proper stance and ready to hit that corner hard. If your bike, the lower your bike goes unnecessarily, the longer it takes to get to the bottom, and the longer it'll take to get back up. So it delays things. So if you don't have enough compression or low speed compression dampening, it will often delay things, your suspension getting back to its proper position. So it's important to have enough on the shock and the forks, but right now I'm trying to focus on the shock here. It's important to have enough low speed compression in there so that it controls unnecessary movement. So when you land, you get a little bit of compression, but not a whole lot, and you know, for a smaller landing, and you get a good amount of feedback, but yet at the same time it's not bone jarring or anything. And the thing with the low speed compression is there is a bypass for it. So what's happening here in the shock is you have fluid in the main shock body here, and when the shaft for the shock gets compressed into the shock body, that fluid has to go somewhere. So it's displaced into this bladder right here. So it travels right through here and into the bladder. It has to go through this needle to get to there. So the more you turn this in, the slower the fluid's going to be able to get into the reservoir, which means the slower it's going to be able to compress. However, if the force is hard enough, like let's say a big jump and you land right on G out, and the rear end has to compress really quick, then there's a bypass valve in here that will bypass that low speed clicker, and that's called your high speed compression. That's what they call it. And it has some shims with a little spring. So after a certain amount of force of the fluid coming from the shock to in here, a hard enough hit, it will bypass the low speed compression, and because the high speed will open up. And that's actually, when you adjust your high speed, that's actually the only thing you're really adjusting, is at what point does it bypass the low speed and just let the fluid come through here much quicker, which at that point all the dampening will be controlled by the shim stack inside your shock on the piston. But that's a whole nother topic, and we're not going to get into that. So that would be like for revalving, and we're just trying to focus on tuning in. But since now that we know that the low speed is not really going to be used to control bottoming, because when you hit hard enough hits, it's going to bypass the low speed anyway and hand it all to this high speed. So that's not to control bottoming. That's for your feel. Now, as you turn it in, you might notice that it does help keep you from getting to the bottom, but that's only because there are certain parts of the stroke that the speed of the rear suspension being compressed is slow enough that will fully kick in. So like, let's say you have a big hit and the first half of your travel is real fast. That high speed valve will open up and the low speed compression will have nothing to do. But then the last little bit, the last half, it slows down because now you already absorbed most of the impact, and you just have to take the last little bit of the impact, and it's slower now. That's when the high speed's the low speed's gonna step back into play, because the shaft speed, the shock speed, the amount of speed that it is compressing has slowed down some. So it can help keep you from getting to the bottom, but that's not what its purpose is for. So when I adjust the low speed compression on the shock, the biggest thing that I'm really concerned about is the feel that I'm looking for. When I hit the little jittery bumps on the track, how much do I want to feel them? As you turn it in, you'll start feeling every little and as you turn it out, you can actually turn it out far enough where that stuff becomes completely invisible. But the problem with making it invisible is now you don't know when your wheels are touching the ground or not, when they're on the ground or not. So you want to turn it in where you do feel the track, you do feel the little bumps and stuff like that, but it's not like, bone shattering or anything or jarring. It's just you can just tell what's happening back there. So you tune in a good amount of feel. And also you want to pay attention to, again, unnecessary movement. If your bike seems to be, assuming you have the correct springs and stuff, if your bike seems to be doing a lot of this around the track and just, slow moving up and down, a lot of this, and you got the rebound set where you want it, and you got your springs set, you got your springs chosen correctly, your low speed compression is going to control a lot of that, especially on things like drop offs, or when you experience like a zero gravity feel but the landings are a little bit softer. That's where your low speed compression is going to come into play. So the main thing with low speed compression, it's more about what you're feeling, and like the rebound, it's also there to help keep the bike in check, to give it some tension. And well, to be quite honest, you pretty much can apply all that to the forks too. It's the same thing. It's all about feel. If you don't have enough low speed compression, if you haven't turned the clicker in enough, it's just not going to feel very. You're not going to have a lot of feeling. It's going to feel very floaty. And then if you turn the rebound, the compression clickers in too far, then every little sharp edge bump and shutter bump, braking bumps, accelerating bumps, and things like that are going to come right up onto your hands too hard, and it's going to be kind of bone jarring. So too much is going to cause that bone jarring experience where it's just front end's always kind of skipping around. Too little is going to cause the front to feel too vague, and you can't feel what's going on up front. So you want to tune it in to where you do have some feedback, you can feel your wheels, and at the same time, just like the rear, it helps control some unnecessary movement, so that the bike is always ready, and ready for attack. So anything it hits, it's ready for the next obstacle. You want it to get right back into its stance, and any unnecessary movement is just a waste of time. So you're trying to eliminate that, but also not get too much feedback, just enough so you know what's going on. And you also don't want it too soft, the low speed compression, both front and rear, so that it becomes so transparent that you just can't feel what's going on down there. And with both front and rear, the rebound does affect the low speed compression, like I mentioned, and the rebound clicker, as well as the rebound affects the low speed compression as well as the low speed compression clicker. So I'll give you an example here. On this bike right here, at a track over here, 74, I was kind of noticing that they have like these 3 tabletops in a row, and I would notice that I'd land from one tabletop and it felt like the bike was it was taking that landing too far into the face of the next one, and I was trying to eliminate that. I needed the bike to get back up into a stance quicker for the face of the next tabletop. At first I thought, well, maybe the rebound's the issue. So I tried turning the rebound. Nope, that wasn't the issue. At that point, it went down, but it was just coming up too slow. It didn't. By the time I hit the next jump, it actually made the situation worse. So then I put the rebound back to where it was. I said, okay, let me add more low speed compression. I went 1 click on the rear and 1 click more on the front forks. Both forks added 1 click on each one and 1 click on the rear shock, and that actually did the trick perfectly. I mean, it made it feel like a race bike. I would jump that first table, land, and I just, and the bike would already be settled and back into its normal ride height by the time I hit the next face, and allowed me to get in the proper body positioning for the next face, so I can try to scrub some air or speed off the next face or whatever I needed to do. But I needed the bike to be back up in its riding position quicker. And I could have removed rebound technically to receive that, but I knew just by the way the bike felt that wasn't the answer, that it was just going down too low in the stroke unnecessarily. And going too low in the stroke unnecessarily doesn't help anything. It's just a waste of energy, and it keeps your bike out of its proper stance for too long. So you want it to absorb its hits, give you a little bit of feedback, absorb its hits, but also get back up into its stance as quick as you can, without it doing anything stupid. And to add on that, the reason I knew it wasn't the reason I knew I couldn't just turn the rebound clickers out to help that is because it wasn't so much spending too much time coming back up. It was spending too much time going down instead of just taking the hit and getting back up in a stance. I noticed it was just too and I needed to take the big part of the hit, and that was it. The last little bit of just diving down slow for no reason wasn't helping anything. It's not making any softer on me. It's not helping my joints. It's just a waste of suspension travel. I needed to add some more compression, dampening, low speed to remove that unnecessary movement, so the bike didn't get too low for no reason, because the lower it goes, it has to come back up, and it can't come back up too quick or you'll get a bounce or there won't be enough rebound dampening. So you want to set it where it doesn't go unnecessarily low for no reason, because then it has to waste all that time coming back up, and that's time wasted that your bike needs to get back in its proper stance. So by adding low speed compression and removing that unnecessary compression as it was going down, it made it where it was able to, it had less to come back up to get the proper stance, which shortened the amount of time that it took for it to get into its proper stance for the next tabletop that was coming up quick. And the faster you go, the faster they come up. And now we're going to move to the high speed compression adjustment on the rear shock and the fork oil height on the forks. And the reason I put these two together is because they correlate with each other. These two affect each other. This is where you're going to receive your bottoming resistance. Assuming that you have the spring rates correct and you have everything else correct. This is where you're going to fine tune your bottoming resistance. And I know this firsthand because the few times I've added high speed to because the rear end was going too low in its stroke on some of the big hits, so I added some high speed. I oftentimes would have to add a little bit of oil and the forks to balance the bike back out on the big hits. And the opposite is true. There has been times that I was adding fork oil into the forks at the track, just adding a little at a time to get the bottoming resistance that I want, and I might have went a little bit too far, and I didn't want to take oil back out. It's a lot harder to take oil out than it is to add it. So I would just go back here and just add a little more high-speed compression, and it would balance it right back out. So I know from experience that these two are connected. And just like everything else, these can also affect the bike's pitch in the air, whether it jumps front and high or front and low. If you add too much oil in the forks, they will jump. The bike can end up jumping front and high. If you add too much low-speed compression on the rear shock, it can end up jumping front and low. The back end will be high and the front end will be low. But I got to talk a minute about this little adjustment right here, the high-speed compression. It's probably the most misunderstood adjustment on the whole bike, in my opinion. I've seen people at the track and they just put a wrench on it and they turn it like a whole turn and go out and test it. This thing is so sensitive. I mean, sure, if you're way out of your range, then yeah, it might take a big turn. But once you get it close, it's the smallest adjustments. Matter of fact, you see all these little lines I have right here? These are adjustments I made. You'll see if right now I have it at the last line right there, because I typically keep creeping it firmer and firmer by going in. And the reason I do that is because it seems as if through time it gets the rear suspension kind of gets softer. I think the spring, that's all you're doing.